I'm Nathan Najib, and this is Real Talk, Real Advice, Real Difference. Our guest today is a guy that I've admired from far. I would have been in my some 6 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
6 years ago, I would have been 28, and I watched a video of yours that you spoke at the assembly in Boys High.
Well, we can't be the best at everything, or even times at anything. What we can choose to have is moral strength. Moral strength is another of Boys High values. I wrote about this before I knew I had cancer, and now I have a whole new spin on it. Moral strength is about making a conscious decision to be a person who doesn't give up when it would be easy to. To be lesser because the journey is less arduous. Jim Rohn said, "Let others live small lives, but not you. Let others argue over small things, but not you. Let others cry over small hurts, but not you. Let others leave their future in someone else's hands, but not you." Of course, doing this will mean at some point you'll have to face your fear of falling short, a fear of looking like a fool, a fear of not being enough. And being senior monitor meant facing these fears every day. But here's the thing. None of us get out of life alive. So be gallant, be great, be gracious, and be grateful for the opportunities that you have. The opportunity to learn from the men who have walked before you and those who walk beside you. Boys High, I've been absent for 3 weeks. Could you please stop sending my mother texts every morning asking if she knows where I am? That aside, I've missed you all dearly. For the past 5 years, I've been a proud student who attended Christchurch Boys High, and from today onwards, for the rest of my life, I will be a proud old boy, giving back to those before me as they've given to me. My challenge to each of you and to myself is to continue to grow and to develop for the better. The future is truly in our hands. Forget about long-term dreams. Let's be passionately dedicated to the pursuit of short-term goals. Micro-ambitious. Work with passion and pride on what is in front of us. We don't know where we might end up or when it might end up. Some of us will not cross paths again. Some of us will likely be seen on TV, others in print, some of us in prison. But I've thoroughly enjoyed growing up with each and every one of you. You know it's true. It's just... I've thoroughly enjoyed growing up with all of you, and it's been an honour and a delight to share these years of my life with you. I know that as I look at all of you, I'll measure my time here and the friendships I've had in these last years. Some were pretty casual, others were much closer, but I remember each one fondly, and I'm sure you will too. And when the many memories of our high school years begin to fade, that's ultimately how we may measure our time here. Not in the classes, or the lunch times, or the exam results, or the years, but in the friendships that we've made and the times we've shared together. And so here we stand. Our rule is over, and it is up to the next class to step into our shoes and take over. I hope that those of you who follow on will carry on a proud legacy. May the lads that follow benefit from the school's work to replicate the hall and the community spirit that undeniably comes from sitting together as one, strength and character of this mighty institution combined. I don't know where it goes from here for any of us. For me, for you, but I wish you the very best in your journey, and I thank you all for being part of mine. Wherever we go and whatever we do, may we always be friends when we meet again. Aotearoa Piro.
And I had shivers. I was like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. And that's the video that went viral, yeah? I can understand why. We'll play that at the start so people watch the video that hasn't seen it. Everybody I've spoken to that I've got you coming, people are like, oh, Jake Bailey? I says, yes, that's him. So it's my pleasure to bring to you today Jake Bailey. Thank you for coming in, man.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it, eh?
Pleasure. Thanks for coming in. Now, tell me, let's go back to 6 years ago. You were getting sick, obviously, and you went to the doctor. Tell me how that went. How did that?
Sure. So I mean that's pretty much perfectly 6 years ago now. So it was around this time of year that, well, I should say we're in sort of mid-October now. So it was around this time, and a little bit earlier as well, I'd begun to experience some pain in my wisdom teeth and my jaw, and it was as my wisdom teeth were coming through, so it wasn't necessarily unexpected. I mean, wisdom teeth they're a pain in the ass, they're painful. And that pain was pretty bad initially, and over a period of a number of weeks, it began to get significantly worse. So the pain would be, for about an hour a day, it would be verging on unbearable. There was very little that I could do to kind of handle it, apart from to take some leftover codeine, which I'd had from a sports injury, and to pretty much pace around the house, trying to distract myself and hoping that the pain would subside. So as a result of this, I went to my dentist, who took an x-ray of my jaw. He said that there was a dark mark on one side and that it wasn't a cyst or an abscess or an infection of any kind, but he wasn't exactly sure what it was. And so he sent me away to a maxillofacial surgeon to have those teeth removed. Whilst I was waiting for that appointment, which was a number of weeks later down the line, I began to experience some other side effects and symptoms, things like losing sensation in the lower half of my face, as what later turned out to be tumours began to compress the nerves which supply sensation to the lower half of the face. I lost a considerable amount of weight. I lost about 12 kgs over a fortnight. But at the same time, I wasn't eating solid food, so it wasn't necessarily all that unexpected in that kind of context. And I just generally felt very unwell. And it sort of came to, it's basically culminated in the final weekend of the term 3 school holidays of 2015, when I woke up one morning and I was quite literally bedridden. I was so unwell that I couldn't get out of bed, and that same day I began to throw up blood, at which point I was admitted to the acute medical assessment unit at Christchurch Hospital. And from there I underwent a whole bunch of different tests and procedures. Underwent a PET scan, a CT scan, an MRI, an ultrasound, a gum biopsy, a kidney biopsy, a bone marrow aspirate, and a spinal tap over the course of about 3 or 4 days. The blood tests which the doctors had done throughout the time I'd been there and since I'd arrived had shown basically that my kidneys were shutting down day by day. It was quite measurable progress, and so they were aware that there was something going wrong, that basically I was dying on the paper in front of them. And as a result of these tests, basically I was in my hospital room one afternoon, and a lady who I hadn't met before came into that hospital room. She sat down on the bed beside me. She introduced herself as a haematologist, and I didn't know what one of those was. And she explained to me very slowly and very calmly that I had a type of cancer called Burkitt's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, that it was the fastest growing cancer known to man, and that because of that, I probably only had about 2 weeks left to live without treatment, and even with treatment, there wasn't necessarily a guarantee of life either way, as the cancer was very advanced. It was through my brain lining, eye sockets, nasal passages, sinuses, gums, spinal fluid, my pancreas, and both of my kidneys. So it was a very late diagnosis, and I was in a bit of a spot of trouble.
At 18, you were 18 at this time.
Yep.
Before that pain in your wisdom teeth, before that, anything at all?
No, before that I'd been living a really normal life for a teenage guy. I was playing sport and focusing on my academic studies, preparing to go away to university the following year. I was a leader at my school, and I was just living a normal life of, partying, spending time with my mates and my girlfriend and my family, just enjoying being a young guy and sort of making the most of my youth. So it was a very normal year up until that point.
So you're 18-year-old, go to the hospital, and the hematologist comes and tells you you've got 2 weeks to live.
Yep, 2 weeks without treatment and not really a guarantee of life, even if I accepted treatment. You know, it's funny. It's none of the emotions or feelings which I think most people would expect or anticipate in that kind of situation. I think most people would expect that you would feel afraid or scared or angry or upset, I guess, distraught. And in that situation, there was kind of none of those emotions came to the forefront for me. I think I was really determined to get on with my treatment. I think that, you know, the bottom line was that I was aware that there was no way out of the situation that I was in other than going through it and pushing on. And so, especially given the speed which it needed to be undertaken at, I was very keen to get started on things, and so that I could come out the other side of it and be done with it. But apart from that, I guess there was just a sense of numbness. There wasn't really any emotion around it at all. It certainly wasn't the profoundly negative or traumatic experience which I think most people would anticipate that it was. It was very matter of fact, and I was in some ways relieved to have received a diagnosis after a number of weeks or months of suffering through these symptoms and being well aware that my condition was deteriorating, and that if it wasn't kind of arrested soon or that something wasn't done soon, that I would be in a even more precarious position than I was.
Wow. You see, determination. Let's say somebody's going through cancer now, they've just been diagnosed. What would you be? What was one of the things you would say, hey, that is what you should, how I did it, and that's what I suggest you do?
Yeah, I guess the one thing that jumps out for me, and it's something which is very applicable through adversity of all kinds, is for some people, not for all, but certainly for many and for myself in that situation, a tendency to draw back into yourself or to push other people away around you. And the reality is that in times of really challenging adversity and in these situations, what needs to be done is to draw as many people in as possible and to lean on as many people through that time as you can. And that doesn't have to be in even the typical settings which you might expect. There was certainly a lot of support from my girlfriend and my family and my friends, the people who I'd relied on previously and been close to throughout and prior to my treatment. But also there was other people around that, and one of the groups of people that really jumps out in my memory is the nurses. I had an incredibly close relationship with the nurses in the hospital because they're just outstanding people. Some of the best people that I've ever met in my life were the people who worked within that ward, be it the doctors, the nurses, the cleaners, the lunch ladies. It was an amazing group of people who I really drew in and drew close to, and who supported me throughout that time in so many different ways. And you know, without them and without that support, it would have been really challenging to sort of see the way that I would have had a pathway through that time. And as I said, it's an incredibly natural human emotion a lot of the times to withdraw and to draw back into oneself during these times of adversity and challenge. But you need to be consciously aware of that, and you need to counter that by pushing out and to draw as many people inwards to you as you can to lean on, because you know, the majority of adversity and challenges that you'll face in life are certainly more challenging and often impossible to conquer alone.
On your own, absolutely. Lean on people. I think you see the beautiful, like, you know, get people close to you that can help you and guide you, advise you. That is truly important. I've heard you before when we caught up last week. You talk about resilience and determination. You see that now. You got to have a path or through a tunnel. You should be able to see through the other end, right? Otherwise, if give you a diagnosis, I haven't been through it myself. I had a sister of mine that I lost to cancer, so I know what it's like to be close to somebody who's going through this, and having somebody who's determined. That's kind of very important, is it not? When you're going through this kind of adversity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the people around you and the support that people offer you through that time is extraordinarily profound. And during these times of real vulnerability, I mean, vulnerability is the basis of all human connection. Vulnerability creates trust, and trust creates connection. And in a lot of ways, going through an experience like this, it's a really special time in many ways. And the relationships which I formed and furthered during that experience are undoubtedly the closest that I will probably ever have throughout my life, because to allow people into your space, to see you at your weakest, at your most vulnerable, takes an extraordinary level of trust, and that trust is the basis of connection with people. So it's quite special in a lot of ways as well.
That's cool, because you say it with a big smile, Jack. Like, you say this is, I think you see this is the best thing happened to you, this cancer, right?
Absolutely.
And you talk about resilience, you talk about gratitude, you talk about contribution. We're going to talk through each and every one of them, but I think I was just chatting before earlier this morning with my team, and I said, I think everybody, I'm not being unempathetic here, but I think everybody should go through cancer or something as challenging to appreciate life. Because I know when I sat down with you, the last week, and I felt the presence, and I was like, wow. And this guy's only 24. So tell me more about what it teaches you about life.
100%. I mean, and I sort of have to preface anything that I say about this with an understanding of the fact that my experience with cancer and my experience with adversity in general is significantly different to other people's experiences. So I can't speak from the place of everybody. I can't kind of speak on behalf of everyone who's been within this, the space of health challenges or cancer or any form of adversity. But speaking from my own perspective, you're absolutely correct that cancer is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I would not change it for the world. I would go through it 10 times over to reap the same rewards which have come out the other side of that. And when I say reap the rewards for me have not been any of the opportunities necessarily that have come about through my experience to be able to share my story or any of these things like that. The rewards which I talk about are the perspective and the lessons which I've taken away from going through that experience at such a young age. And I think going through a really challenging 3 months has set me up to have a significantly better 60 years following that time than I would have had otherwise. I think there's a lot of lessons which I've taken away and things which have made me a better person, a happier person, a kinder person, someone who really embraces and makes the most of each opportunity and each day that they have. And these are probably all lessons and experiences which I would have gone on to gain throughout life otherwise. But they're probably experiences which would have taken me a lot longer to kind of garner. And I probably would have known or understood these things by the time I was 50 or 60 maybe. Yeah. But to have only learnt them at that point and then to have 20 years to apply them seems like such a waste. Whereas to have learnt them at 18 and to go out into life now with just such an immense, overwhelming sense of gratitude, a sense of duty to make the most of every opportunity that I have, and a sense of duty to do the best that I can and to make the most of these opportunities that I've got. It's going to profoundly alter the course of my life. And so I feel extraordinarily grateful to have been through the challenges that I have at the time that I did, and to have been able to take away kind of these blessings, these unexpected gifts of cancer and of adversity in general. And like you said, I sincerely hope that everyone can not experience what I've been through, but that they can garner the same lessons or perspective on life, on the world, on opportunity that going through this experience has given me. Because I can undoubtedly say that if people can take away kind of 10% of what I feel about my experience and apply that to their life will be measurably, noticeably better, happier, more impactful. And that's not about that's not about anything special or unique to me. It's just about a universal set of learnings and understandings and experiences which I think people can derive if they look hard enough at life and what is important to them.
A gift badly wrapped.
A gift badly wrapped, 100%.
Right. And you call it a blessing. It really is. I think I come from a third world country, right? So I appreciate the life we have. And I've lost my sister, right? And I'm like, now I'm thinking about her. I look at life, I'm like, this thing is so short, one, right? Number two, everything that you accumulate doesn't mean nothing, because you can't take the thing with you, right? And it puts things in perspective. When I sit down with somebody, have a conversation like this, and I'm sure you as well, because I can feel your presence, I'm like, this might be the last time I see this guy. I might just walk out, and I might just have a crash, or whatever it may be, right? What's the message that you want to pass on to people about life? Because I think that is one of the most important things I think people need to know, because we haven't got forever to live.
100%, and I mean that's pretty much it. Humans are not designed to exist with an awareness of how delicately balanced our whole world is around us. Because for the majority of us, if we were even remotely aware of how close we come every day to losing someone we love, or to having our life completely tipped upside down through absolutely no fault of our own, we would spend most of our time kind of wrapped up in bed, kind of curled into a ball, shivering about it. So I think what people need to understand is that, and something which we talked about the other day, but how many people there are just like us, as young and as vibrant as us, with the same dreams and ambitions, just as vivid as ours, who unfortunately die, who sort of have their light snuffed out prematurely. And I guess my experience has certainly given me the opportunity to see that firsthand. And I was incredibly fortunate to be one of the people who walked out of that ward in the hospital. There were plenty of people who were wheeled out of there, and they were of all different walks of life, all different ages. They certainly never expected to be the person that got struck down and died of cancer when they were 20, 30, 40, 10, 12. But unfortunately, that's the reality, is that it can happen to any of us, and it can happen to any of our loved ones. But that reality is not a reason to be scared or afraid of the future. It's the absolute opposite. It's a reason that you should get out there and live each day to the very fullest, with passion and with pride, simply because you are able to do so, and simply because you ought to have an awareness of the fact that the ability to do so is not a given. It's actually a real privilege and a gift. And I guess that's one of the things which I feel most grateful for about my experience. And the thing which about my experience and what I've been through, which has changed me as a person, is not kind of what I've been through along the way. I think what's changed me as a person about my experience is having seen what other people have gone through. And I've met 10-year-old kids who have 3 years of chemotherapy ahead of them. And I've met teenagers who walked virtually the same path as me until our paths kind of diverged at the end, and they didn't keep on going, and I got the opportunity to keep on moving forward. And I've met families who were absolutely torn apart by cancer. And I guess I learned that what happened to me, I wasn't unlucky. I was actually extraordinarily fortunate to not have something worse or more challenging happen to me. And it's given me a sense of obligation, because, like I said, I was one of the people who walked out of that ward, and there were plenty who did not. And for me, every day that I live, I do so with an understanding that I'm on borrowed time, and that if it wasn't for a fair amount of luck and some incredible medical intervention 6 years ago, my body would have kind of given up, and I wouldn't still be here. And because of that, and with an understanding that there are many other people along that way, along that road that I walked, who didn't get that opportunity, I go out and I live each and every day to the very fullest, and I try and achieve as much as I can, live as many experiences as I can on behalf of those people who are no longer able to do so, because there are so many of them. And I mean, that's not an obligation that I think I kind of carry alone. I don't think that's my responsibility simply because I was on that ward with them and I met them and I heard their stories. I think that's actually a societal responsibility. I think we all have an obligation to go out and to live life to our very fullest on behalf of those who are no longer able to do so. And I think to not do so, to not take that opportunity up, would be the most selfish thing that I could do. And that's what drives me every day, to do as much as I can.
Yeah. And the sooner in life we get those obstacles, those challenges, the quicker we realize, unfortunately, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, or people dead, they haven't embraced life as much as you would suggest they should, right? A lot of people go leave the dreams and ambitions, everything behind, and it's too late there because they're like in 80s now, right? So living every day like it's your last day is what you suggest.
And it's a real challenge at the same time. I mean, the reality is that there are so many things which we ought to be grateful for, but you don't really know what you've got until it's gone a lot of the time. And it's a real challenge to try and think about these things and really drill down into into how lucky we are. Because like I said before, we're not, as humans, we're not designed with this capacity to have an understanding of how delicately balanced our life is around us, or how lucky we are, or therefore on the flip side, how unlucky we could be if we're unfortunate. There are things through my story which have made me, powerfully grateful for the smallest things. And one of those things was after my chemotherapy and my treatment, I was left with nerve damage through my legs, a condition called peripheral neuropathy. So much like if you have a severed spinal cord from a broken back, the messages do not get through from the brain to the lower half of the body. As a result of the chemotherapy attacking the nerves in my body, the messages would kind of not get through, or they would get through in the wrong order, or they would get through at the wrong time. So as a result of that, I was left unable to walk unassisted. I spent a lot of time in a wheelchair, a lot of time on crutches. I had to be carried up and down stairs by my parents. I had to be rolled over in bed at night by my girlfriend of 3 months because I couldn't roll myself over in bed at night. And I remember one day I was in a car with my mum. We were going to the Burwood Spinal Unit to do rehabilitation there, to try and teach me to walk again. And we pulled up at the lights outside of school, and there were some young guys, probably around my age at the time, in their teens, and they were playing basketball on one of the courts there. And it was just, it was nothing major. It was just some mates kind of shooting hoops one afternoon with a few friends. And I remember sitting there in the car thinking to myself, I wonder if there was any way I could make these guys understand just how lucky they are to be able to do that. At the time, I couldn't play any sport. I couldn't actually go out with my friends typically because it was hugely inconvenient. I could only sort of walk 50 metres or so at a time on these crutches before I got exhausted. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if it's possible to make people understand just how fortunate they are for such small things they would take for granted, like shooting hoops with mates at a basketball court. And I'm not sure whether it is or not, but it certainly for me in my story, I parked my car across the road today and I walked over the road to your offices, and I thought to myself, 5 years ago, 5 and a bit years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't have been able to get up the stairs into here and to be able to see these things and to feel the extraordinary amount of gratitude that comes from them as a result of that. I feel like I'm living life on easy mode, because it's pretty tough to have a bad day when you're grateful for such small things like that.
It's pretty tough to have a bad day when you're grateful, full stop, right? 100%. And you were saying you wish you could let these kids, big kids, small kids, older kids, know about how precious this thing called life is, because the doctor looked at you in your eyes and said, hey, you got 2 weeks to live, right? Now, how can we pass that on to people, let people know how precious this thing life is, or how to understand that you shooting hoop there, somebody wish they could go there and shoot hoop. Right?
It's funny. I mean, I don't know if there is any way to do it, because like I said, I think as humans we're not designed to be aware of this. I think it would terrify most people to understand how close they come to massive adversity on a regular basis. I think what we know is that throughout life, everyone at some point will face this huge adversity. This is a concept that psychologists refer to as inevitable adversity. It's the idea that bad things don't happen to bad people or careless people or people who do the wrong things or people who deserve it. Bad things happen to good people, and they happen to everyone at some point. So what we know is that all of these young people, and all of the young people that I work with through my work, they will face massive adversity at some point in their life, as we all do at some point. And so I think instead what my focus is on preparing these young people for that adversity.
It could be old people too,
100%, 100%. And it's such a universal experience, this situation of facing these challenges in life. So I I think it's about preparing people to face that adversity so that when it arrives, they're able to draw as much benefit as possible away from that adversity. They're able to really understand some of the lessons which come through from going through that experience, and that they're hopefully able to take away this gratitude that we're talking about instead of being bogged down by the difficulty that they're facing at the time.
Resilience, we spoke about, and I want to bring you back to resilience. We know adversity builds character, and you said that many times today. It builds character. When you know, when you've been through hard yards like you have, when you've had somebody stare at you and says you got 2 weeks to live. Now, anything else is like, Jesus, throw it at me, right? Hit me with it, right? So, diamonds are made under pressure. What can you talk about resilience? Because I know you speak about it a lot, but what would you talk about resilience? What is it for you, and what do you suggest?
Sure, I mean, yeah, there's so much I could talk about it for. I mean, resilience is my passion in life. Resilience is what gets me excited. So I could talk about resilience for kind of days, but I guess if I had to condense it down to as much as succinct advice as possible. The first thing is when facing adversity, when going through tough times in life, we have, and I think particularly young people as well, but in general, people have a real tendency to view adversity as one whole event, to look at it through the lens of one massive challenge. And unfortunately, doing so makes the adversity seem completely unable to be overcome, makes it seem completely life-changing or life-destroying. When facing massive challenges in life, the only way to get through them typically is to break it down into bite-sized chunks. And it's a concept which psychologists refer to as chunking. So it's about the idea of taking things a week at a time, a day at a time, an hour at a time, whatever it is that you can manage, and breaking it up and facing it one bit by one bit. For me, through my experience of going through cancer and my treatment, if I had have looked at the 100 or so days of chemotherapy that lay ahead of me, all of these horrific medical procedures which I was going to go through, it would have seemed like a mountain which was impossible to conquer. And I genuinely doubt whether I would have been able to overcome that one overarching challenge of cancer if I had have viewed it that way. But by focusing on getting through today's chemotherapy and completely ignoring the fact that there was more chemotherapy tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that, it tricks your brain into believing that it is bearable somehow. It makes it seem possible to overcome. So the first thing is to break the adversity down into whatever you can manage, whether it's 10 minutes, whether it's 10 hours, whether it's 10 days. Break it down into something which you can manage. Don't let yourself become overwhelmed, because otherwise you will stagnate and you will not continue to progress forward through this challenge. Second thing is then, once you've broken it down into chunks, you need something to be able to keep you moving forward throughout that process. So for me, I talk about finding light in the darkness, and other people might talk about finding silver linings or finding the good within the bad. And in my experience of cancer, I mean, it becomes virtually farcical at some points, but there are times when I would be in hospital and I would be going through this horrific treatment on that kind of, very, very unwell. It goes without saying, I suppose, but I would find anything good within that space, within that time that I could. And it would be things like, yes, I can't go out and live a normal life like all of my mates are right now. I'm stuck in this hospital room, but my girlfriend's coming to watch Netflix with me tonight. Or, yes, I've got a spinal injection of chemotherapy today, and it's going to be horrific, but there's something good on TV that I'm looking forward to tonight. Or, yes, I've got cancer, and I am going through this, but it's not someone that I love, and I don't have to watch them go through it, because I think that would be so much more challenging. And there's a real skill and a real ability in being able to find these little bits of good within the bad. And at the end of the day, I mean, these things are ridiculous. I mean, they're not big things. But the unfortunate reality is that at some points in your life, at the darkest, most challenging points of adversity in your life, sometimes that is all that there will be left. The only thing that you will have left is the small things. You won't have the big things. And once you can capture those small things and you can try and draw every single last little bit of joy or happiness or excitement or anything positive out of that. You really have to focus on absolutely draining them of any positive emotion. That is what keeps pushing you forward through those chunks or through those blocks that you've created. You've got to find something good within each one of those blocks and keep pushing on and on and on, taking them one at a time, finding whatever you can that's positive within that experience and continuing to progress forward. And I guess, that's probably the most succinct way I could sum up a very small aspect of how to face adversity or what it means to overcome adversity and to build resilience. But I think those are two things which, particularly looking back on my story, that helped me through that time.
Amazing. Talking about adversity, a lot of salespeople watch this podcast, obviously being a real estate related podcast. But I think this conversation is life related, and I think small things that people get upset about is like, somebody maybe hanged up on them, or maybe the sale didn't go through, right? Or perhaps somebody rejected them, right? Having going through adversity like you have makes those things sound pretty small, right?
In some ways, sure. It's interesting though, and a lot of the lens which I think people view adversity through, there's this concept which psychologists refer to as the African child fallacy. It's the whole idea that, why do you feel bad? Because the kids in Africa have it so much worse. And the whole point of the term, fallacy being at the end of that is because it's a completely incorrect way of viewing things. The bottom line is the worst adversity that you've ever been through in your life is the worst adversity you've ever been through in your life. It's the worst thing you can imagine or picture or understand what it is like to feel inside. Because of that, certainly facing multitudes of small adversities or small challenges, the cumulative effect of that is still significant, and it should not be discounted. There's no point in looking at my story and saying, he's been through so much worse than what I'm going through now, so why would I feel this way? Well, I don't have a right to feel this way, or discounting your own emotions as a result of that. What you can do is another thing called it's drawing courage or stealing courage from other people. And looking at my story again, my experience was there was always someone who had it tougher than me on that ward, right? Because my experience in the grand scheme of things was not that bad, even relative to what other people going through cancer go through. There was a guy in the room next door to me who had a brain tumour, and what the doctors had done is they drilled a hole through the top of his skull and put a port into it, and every day they would put chemotherapy directly onto the top of his brain to treat this brain cancer. And he was doing it tough. Like, I knew this because I could hear him throwing up through the wall. And so I knew he was doing it really tough. And there were times when I was doing it tough as well, and I would lay there and I would think to myself, this guy in the room next door to me, he undeniably, undoubtedly has it tougher than I do, right? He's doing it tougher than I am, but he is still continuing to push forward. He's still making it through each day. He's still moving on forwards, and he's just as human as I am. He's just as real as I am. He's another person. We're sort of created equal, and therefore, if I'm in this spot now and I feel like I have nothing more to give, if I feel like I can't go any further right now, and yet he is another person who's doing it tougher than I am, and he is continuing to push forward, then therefore there must be something from within me or inside me which I have more to give. Because he obviously has it, I obviously have it somewhere inside, and I have to find that. And so what I've done in those toughest points was absorbing courage from other people. It was seeing the bravery and courage that other people around me on that ward displayed, and to try and draw inspiration or motivation from that. Now, to be clear, that wasn't about me saying, hey, he's got it tougher than I have, so therefore my emotions are invalid or my emotions are not deserved. Instead, what it's about is saying, hey, this guy's got it tougher than I have, but he's braver and stronger, and therefore I can be as well. And it's about, hearing about anyone's story of adversity, whether that's my story, whether that's anyone's story, because we all have a story about adversity. That experience is not about saying, they've had it tougher or they've got it tougher right now, therefore my emotions are invalid or my experience is inferior. Instead, it's about saying, if they can do it, then I can do it as well.
So feel your emotions, but don't give up. And don't compare yourself with somebody who's perhaps doing better than you.
I think don't compare your adversity to other people's, because it doesn't invalidate your adversity at all. The toughest thing that you've ever been through is the toughest thing you can imagine. It's not possible to empathise or imagine something tougher than you've been through, I don't think. But use other people's stories, experiences, journeys that they're going through to provide you with inspiration and with motivation to keep on pushing on. Because that's what got through. Honestly, that's what got me through some of the toughest points during my treatment, was seeing how brave and how strong some of those people around me were. And I mean, some of these people are kids. Some of these people are 9, 10 years old. And the amount of adversity and strength which they displayed is truly astounding. I mean, I'm not the most resilient person out there, for sure. I'm just someone who's fixated and fascinated on the idea of resilience and how we can learn it, how we can communicate and teach it to people.
Were you like this before?
I don't know, probably not so much about resilience. I think certainly having gone through what I've been through over the past few years has given me a real fascination with the idea that if you give someone enough resilience, then they can overcome any adversity. I think that that's really powerful, and I think if we can communicate that to the youth and the young people of today, and provide them with the tools and skills to make them more resilient people, we can create a generation of young people who are able to go out into a really tough world and to be profoundly more successful, but also more happy throughout that experience as well. And I think that's a really powerful thing.
We're living in a very hypersensitive society at the moment. Like, we want to cover our kids with pillows so they don't fall and hurt themselves, right? Now, I think the way you describe it is, it's great to have these kids go through some challenges, because that's going to make them a better human being. They will be more happier. That's why you got so many people being anxious, depressed, and worst case scenario, thinking about committing suicide.
I think the worst thing that you can do for a young person, or for your child, I suppose, is to deprive them of the opportunity to have a training ground for adversity as a young person. The adversities, the challenges which young people face are not life-changing nor life-threatening typically. These are things like failing a test and having to face the consequences of that. Missing out on making a sports team, which they'd tried really hard to get into. Getting a school report which isn't that good and feeling bad about it. And so many parents are naturally inclined to kind of sweep in and to try and save them from this, whether it means going to the head of sport and arguing the case for the young person to be put on the team, or arguing against the teacher about results or a style of teaching. It's a very human instinct to want to save our young people from negative emotions and negative experiences. But the bottom line is, these experiences that they're facing as young people now are the only opportunity they have to learn the tools and skills which they need to face adversity throughout all of their life. And if you rob them of the opportunity to learn now, then when mum or dad is diagnosed with cancer when they're 20, they don't have the skills or the tools to be able to deal with that. And worse yet, you can't take that away from them. Or when they get out into the workplace and they fail to perform and they lose their job, or they fail to get promotions, or they fail to thrive in that setting, there's nothing that mum or dad can do at that point to sweep in and save them. You've already deprived them of the opportunity to learn the skills or to gain the resources which they need to succeed in life. And it is genuinely, I think, the most harmful thing that you can do for a young person, is to deprive them of this opportunity to prepare themselves for the real world, because otherwise, when they get out there and they face this adversity, which inevitable adversity we talked about earlier, these things which will go wrong in their life, and they no longer have these skills or tools to be able to deal with it, and you can't take that away from them, they will suffer immensely.
Then that's when they go to drugs or alcohol
and
resort to that, right? To fix that.
100%. And there are a whole bunch of different pathways which that lead people down, but the bottom line is they will not be as successful, nor will they be as happy or fulfilled as if they've had the opportunity to learn and develop their skills of resilience.
I'm passionate about the young generation, because they will change everything. And I'm reading a book called The Awakened Family by Dr. Shefali, and that's absolutely amazing. And it talks about for your kids, you're like a steward. Like you just gotta usher them. Don't get too much involved. Like, trying to save them from things. Let them fall. Let them get back up. Right? Because that's what builds character. Right? Moving on from resilience, I can talk about this all day, and so can you. I know that, right? Gratitude. You talked about gratitude, and I got this quote this morning. A grateful heart is a magnet for miracles, and the two emotions that destroys human being is fear and anger, and you can't be grateful and fearful simultaneously. Try it, you just can't. Or grateful and angry simultaneously. So tell me about gratitude, because you spoke about gratitude just before, and you bring it up all the time, and I think that's one of the most important things, so we appreciate life, I suppose, in general. Talk about it, please.
I mean, it's funny. I've spent a lot of time sort of through my work pondering whether it's possible to teach gratitude in the same way that I believe you can teach resilience. I don't know if you can teach gratitude. I think gratitude is a gift, and gratitude is something which you can't kind of capture as much as you'd love to. I think that it's something which kind of presents itself to you through adversity, really, at the end of the day. I think that's the way that most people are able to capture gratitude. Because it comes back to this whole concept of what I said before about, not having an awareness of how much you appreciate things until they're taken away from you. And I mean, without sort of drawing on my story too much again, I think back to things like, as an 18-year-old guy, I hated family dinners. Family dinners were the absolute worst, right? So everyone gathers round, some people chew with their mouth open, someone's a slow eater, so you get stuck at the table waiting, you can't go do the dishes until everyone's finished. I hated them. And then I vividly remember being in hospital and eating hospital food by myself in my room, and thinking to myself, man, I would give anything for one of those family dinners that I used to hate so much right now. And I still, I really appreciate family dinners now still to this day, because it's about not being able to know how much you're grateful for until it's taken away from you. And it's pretty impossible to kind of visualize that at the end of the day. I think it's very difficult for someone to take an independent view of what they've got and to visualize what life would be like without, or to put themselves in someone else's shoes. There's no shortage of opportunities to try and do that. There's no shortage of opportunities to look at the world around us and to try and empathize with the situations which other people are in. But I think it's extraordinarily challenging, particularly for young people. I think young people find it very difficult because their understanding and experience of the world is limited by their age. And so it's challenging to try and empathise with other people's situations without having had at least some kind of proximate exposure to it. So gratitude is powerful. Gratitude is a massive thing, but it's something which you sort of have to wait for to come to you in some ways, I think, and to be willing to kind of receive it and be aware of it once it arrives.
I'll tell people, why do you have to wait for this big challenges, whatever it is, to be grateful for, let's say, God forbid, your mother dies and you're grateful for her now? Too late, right? So why can't we be grateful now? The other day you said it would be nice for people to go actually to the hospital and to the cancer ward or walk around, or go to a third world country, right? Just to see what it's like.
100%. And it's about exposure. And I think that's where, those opportunities for people to become engaged with adversity through volunteering work. And I guess for me again, hate to keep bringing it back to myself, but
Because your story is the most amazing. So
Well, I
please.
don't know about that, but I guess through my experience and my story, probably some of the most profound impacts, particularly in terms of gratitude, have not come from what I went through or from my experiences, but it's come about peripherally from the opportunities that I've had to be involved with other families and other young people who are going through cancer as well. And I've been really privileged to be a support person in an informal capacity for a number of families who have had young people going through the same form of cancer that I've had. Some of them have had positive outcomes, some of them haven't had positive outcomes. And having been exposed to that and having lived through that and been able to, I guess, view a similar journey to my own in a lot of ways, but from a third person perspective, has been really profound in terms of the impact that it's had on gratitude and my gratitude in life. And so I think any way in which other people can immerse themselves in that experience and be proximate to this adversity and suffering of other people, I think that's a very powerful way to gain an understanding of how fortunate and lucky you are. It doesn't have to happen to you. Doesn't even necessarily have to happen to someone that you love. I think it can be gained through selfless involvement in some of these causes.
We came from resilience. We spoke about that. That's you going through it. Being grateful is you can go and see what other people are going through, perhaps before it happens to you. Because I think that's a better way if you can become resilient. Say, hey, Jake is going through cancer. I don't have it. I'm grateful for that, right? So rather than going through it, perhaps a stop before is gratitude.
100%. And I think resilience is, difficult to gain without going through things yourself. I mean, adversity is the training ground of resilience.
Sure.
But gratitude, on the other hand, can be learned or developed or drawn from being compassionate and empathetic towards other people's experiences and the challenges which they face.
One of the habits that I've acquired a while back was I write down a journal and I write down what are the things I'm grateful for. When my day finishes, we are messed up, we are tripped, we are kind of fixed. What are the things I'm grateful for? Like catching up with Jake, I'm grateful. They'll go in my journal, of course, and whatever else it may be, small or big, right? Because human mind is designed to look at negative. Usually, you have one negative stuff and 50 good stuff happening to you. Your mind where does it go, right?
Yeah.
Goes to the negative, right? You see the selfless giving back, if you will, contribution, and I think that's pretty powerful too. You got resilience, you got gratitude, you got contribution. Because I really do believe contribution beyond oneself is where fulfillment comes, and you spoke about that last time we had a conversation. I'd love you to elaborate on that.
It's interesting. I mean, even from a mental health perspective, selfless giving and doing kind things for other people has been identified as an incredibly powerful protective factor in terms of one's own mental health. In other words, the research shows that if you do something kind for another person, whether it's big or small, the impact that it has on your well-being is really quite powerful. And some of the recommendations that psychologists make are really small things, like letting someone in traffic. I mean, it makes you happy. And it's a really powerful part of even kind of building your view of who you are as a person. It makes you feel good about yourself. And if you can try and do that every day, if you can do something selfless or kind for another person, it's been shown to be really powerful in terms of your own well-being. Another thing which fits that description, which you just talked about then, is gratitude journaling has also been shown to be a really powerful protective factor in terms of mental health. It trains the brain to identify the positive things in life, and it conditions the brain to become more aware and accustomed to the good things that are always around us. And like you said there, I mean, if you can capture particularly the smaller things. If you can find the small things in your day which you're grateful for and identify them, your brain becomes very, very aware and very conscious of how much good there is around you. And from my experience, that's been extraordinarily powerful from going through my journey and the impact that that's had on me. Probably one of the greatest impacts has been this ability to finally now be aware of how much how much good there is around me a lot of the time. It's easy to lose sight of that because there is so much negativity, particularly displayed through whether it's social media or news. And particularly now, it's a really tough time to be living through. I genuinely believe that now is a really, really sad time to be living through worldwide. There's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of challenges still ahead of us. And so now is probably a better time than ever to try and look for the positivity that you can find within each and every day.
The society, unfortunately, like you talk about society, how there's so much suffering there. The society, it teaches us, unfortunately, you get pleasure from the outside stuff, right? The reality is, things is not going to make you any more happy. They're not going to make you happy. There was research done after once you make 75,000 over that, is like your happiness doesn't increase by much, right, or anything at all, right? But unfortunately, it's been taught to us from the minute that we are kind of born, forever. It's like the happiness on the outside, like you said, that just letting people in traffic, like that makes you happy. Picking up a rubbish from the outside, just down the road, right? That makes you feel good. And the reality is, it's at the end of the day, it's how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself, right? And if you feel good about yourself, then obviously you're good to everybody else too, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's it's very easy to kind of harp on about things not making you happy, like you said there. But there's a really fascinating study which was done, which showed that it was done in the US, and it was done with winners of the lotteries over there, which, their lotteries are pretty friggin' extravagant as well. They're in a different realm to us. So we're talking about people that have won exorbitant amounts of money. And they tracked them, and they found that there was a 30% increase in the happiness and well-being of those who won the lottery after they'd done so. 30% increase, which is pretty solid. 30% uptick in how they rated their well-being and happiness in life. And then they continued on with that study. And I think it was related to some kind of life change. It may have actually been gratitude journaling, but they measured the participants in the study, their self-rated increase in happiness and well-being after they began to do gratitude journaling, and it was a 60% increase in how they rated their happiness and well-being in life. So, and I'm fairly certain it was gratitude journaling. Otherwise, it was something small like doing something kind for someone else once a day. But it had twice the amount of positive impact on the self-rated well-being and happiness of the participants in the study as winning $50 million or $100 million or $200 million had on the winners of the lotto there. So, there's no point in saying that, particularly for some people, that money or that possessions wouldn't take away some of their stresses in life. But it's undeniable that there are other things, far easier things than winning the lotto, which you can do, which will have a far more profound and positive impact on your life. And I think that's an incredibly powerful thing to keep in mind, that a lot of the time your own level of happiness and well-being in life is very much within your control, regardless of the adversity that life throws at you. And that's not to discount the challenges that you'll face in life, but your response to that is entirely within your control. And there are very, very measurable, achievable things which you can do, which will profoundly change your experience of that adversity.
Yeah. We live in an industrious society, obviously. They don't want to teach you that happiness comes from within. It doesn't come from the outside. They want to sell you those more shoes out there, right? They want you to go shopping, right? Yeah. The reality is, get a piece of paper. One evening when you get home, just be thankful for those things. The rain or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah. Small things, Small things like that. Stepping outside the door in the morning and feeling sunshine on your face. I mean, that's a classic. It's cheesy as, but it really is.
But it's not though, right?
Pretty
Isn't it?
damn good.
Yeah,
it's like it's pretty
absolutely.
amazing. And
Yeah.
you're right. I think happiness. We're taught as a society that happiness is a destination or something which we're all striving
Outside
towards.
thing, right?
It is, and it's an end goal.
They teach us an outside thing, like, let's get the happiness on the outside, right?
Yeah.
And
We've got to work towards it, and to achieve that, you need to earn more, to buy more, to have more, to do more. There's something which you have to do to progress towards this final destination of happiness. And I guess going through my experiences, the impression that I've been left with is that happiness is not a destination, but happiness is a skill. And it's a very tangible skill. Because it's a skill, there's a formula to create it. And in my thinking, happiness is simply how quickly and how successfully you can bounce back from the things which will go wrong in your life. In other words, happiness is resilience, because as we've said before, a number of times now, inevitable adversity, these things will go wrong for you. How good of a life you have, how successful of a life you will have, is dictated far more by how quickly you can pick yourself up from the ground, dust yourself off and keep on moving forward, than it's decided by your starting point, say, in terms of how lucky you are, how rich your family are, how fortunate you are, how talented you are even. These things, I mean, I think that we probably do all know someone who has started from a position of immense privilege and who has gone on to sort of fail and fall at the first hurdle simply because they lack the most crucial ingredient of all in success, which is resilience.
Absolutely.
Because the bottom line is you can't have happiness if you can't pick yourself up from the things which will go wrong in your life.
It's interesting because they put pillows around themselves, little kids that don't hurt themselves, right? Now they have one little big adversity, and that's the end of it, right?
Yeah.
Fulfillment comes from contribution, and you know that more than anybody else. I appreciate you. And as Tony Robbins said, if you're not happy right now here, you'll be in a miserable place someplace else. If you're trying to chase this thing called happiness, right? And where can these people find you? Because Jake, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. How long has this been now?
58 months.
I can talk to you for another hour and hours. I know that, and I enjoy every minute of it.
Yes.
Where can these people find you? I'd love them to get connected to you. I watched the video of yours on your website. I thought it was amazing. It was your beautiful family around you as growing up, and it was a documentary, right?
Yeah.
I enjoyed that, so they can watch that for free. Where can they get your book from?
Have a look online. You'll be able to find it online somewhere. Otherwise, if you can't, flick me a message, flick me an email, and I'll find a copy for you. And yeah, any more information, anything that anyone else needs to see or wants to learn, or if they want to reach out and get in touch, just my website, jakebailey.co.nz.
You are absolutely amazing, mate. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.